What if I told you there was a man who figured out exactly how power works? Not how it is supposed to work. Not how kings and politicians pretend it works. How it actually works. In real life. Behind closed doors. When nobody is watching. He wrote it all down. Every secret. Every strategy. Every uncomfortable truth that the powerful have always known, but never wanted ordinary people to understand. And the moment he published it, the entire world turned against him. The church called him the devil. Kings burned his book. Priests condemned him from the pulpit. His name became a curse word. Machiavellian. Even today, 500 years later, that word means something dark, something manipulative, something dangerous. But here is what nobody tells you. The man behind that word was not a villain. He was not a monster. He was not even a powerful man. He was a government servant, a diplomat, a writer, a man who loved his city more than anything in the world, and who spent his entire life trying to save it. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli, and his story is nothing like what they taught you. Because the man who wrote the most feared book about power never had any power himself. The man who advised princes and kings died in poverty, ignored, rejected by the very people he had dedicated his life to serving. He did not write his famous book from a palace. He wrote it from exile, alone, desperate, trying to claw his way back into a world that had thrown him away. And yet, what he wrote in that small farmhouse changed the way every leader, every politician, every strategist in the world thinks about power. Forever. This is the real story of Niccolo Machiavelli. Not the villain, not the monster, the actual man, the actual pain, the actual genius. And once you hear it, you will never look at power or the people who hold it the same way again. In 1469, in the beautiful and dangerous city of Florence, Italy, a boy was born into a family of modest means. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli. Florence at that time was not just a city. It was the center of the known world, the birthplace of the Renaissance, a place where art, philosophy, politics, and power collided every single day on the same streets. Niccolo grew up watching all of it with eyes that never stopped analyzing. His father was a lawyer with a deep love of books, and from the very beginning, he passed that love to his son. Niccolo read everything: Roman history, Greek philosophy, military strategy, political theory. He was not just reading for pleasure. He was trying to understand something that fascinated him from childhood. Why do some men rise and others fall? Why do some cities survive and others collapse? What is the invisible force that separates those who hold power from those who lose it? These questions would define his entire life. When Niccolo was 29 years old, he was given a job that most men in Florence would have considered a dream. He was appointed as a senior official in the Florentine Republic, a diplomat, a political operator, a man trusted with the most sensitive missions the city had to offer. For the next 14 years, Niccolo Machiavelli operated at the highest levels of Italian and European politics. He negotiated with kings. He met with popes. He sat across the table from some of the most powerful and dangerous men in Europe. He watched how they operated, how they made decisions, how they maintained power, and how they lost it. He was not just a participant in these events. He was a student of them, taking notes, forming theories, building in his mind a picture of how power actually worked that was completely different from anything that had ever been written down before. One encounter above all others changed him forever. In 1502, Niccolo was sent on a diplomatic mission to meet a man named Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia was terrifying. He was the son of Pope Alexander VI. He was brilliant, ruthless, charming, and completely without mercy. He was in the middle of a campaign to conquer central Italy through a combination of military force, political manipulation, and calculated violence. Most men who met Cesare Borgia came away frightened. Niccolo came away fascinated, because what he saw in Cesare Borgia was something he had been trying to understand his entire life. He saw a man who understood power completely, who never confused how the world should work with how it actually works, who made decisions based on reality, not on ideals, not on wishful thinking, not on what was morally comfortable. Niccolo watched him, studied him, and filed away everything he observed. Years later, in the most famous book ever written about political power, Cesare Borgia would appear as the closest thing to Machiavelli's ideal prince. For 14 years, Niccolo served Florence with everything he had. He reformed the military. He negotiated treaties. He worked longer and harder than almost anyone around him. He genuinely believed in the Florentine Republic. He believed in its freedom, its independence, its potential. And then, in 1512, everything collapsed. The Medici family, the powerful dynasty that had ruled Florence before the Republic, returned to power backed by a Spanish army. The Republic fell, and Niccolo Machiavelli, the man who had served it faithfully for 14 years, lost everything overnight. He was stripped of his position, dismissed without ceremony, and then accused of conspiracy against the Medici. He was arrested, thrown into prison, and tortured. They used a method called the strappato. His hands were tied behind his back. He was lifted into the air by a rope attached to his wrists, and dropped, repeatedly. The pain was extraordinary. And through all of it, Niccolo refused to confess to something he had not done. He was eventually released, but he was broken, financially ruined, politically destroyed, and banned from Florence entirely. He was sent to a small farm outside the city, alone, with nothing. And it was there, in that exile, in that poverty, in that complete and total humiliation, that Niccolo Machiavelli wrote The Prince. During the day, he worked the land like a peasant. He chopped wood. He argued with locals over card games. He lived a small, diminished life that bore no resemblance to the one he had built over 14 years of service. But every evening, he changed his clothes, put on his finest robes, and sat down at his desk. And in his mind, he re-entered the great courts of Europe. He sat again with kings and popes and military commanders. He had conversations with the great men of ancient history. And he wrote. The prince said things that no one had ever dared to say in print before. It said that a ruler must be willing to act against mercy, against faith, against humanity, against religion, when the survival of his state demands it. It said that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. It said that the ends justify the means. It said that fortune is like a river. You cannot stop it, but you can build walls to control it. These ideas were not invented by Machiavelli. Every powerful ruler in history had operated by them. He simply did something nobody had done before. He said them out loud. He put them on paper. He refused to pretend that power operated by the gentle rules that philosophers and priests described. And the world, which had always known these truths and always denied them, could not forgive him for saying what everyone already knew. Niccolo Machiavelli died on June 21st, 1527. He was 58 years old. He died poor. He died having never regained the position he had lost 15 years earlier. He died having dedicated his greatest work to a man who never read it. He died having written some of the most important political philosophy in human history, and having received almost nothing in return. At his funeral, only a handful of people attended. The city he had loved and served and tried to protect for his entire life barely noticed that he was gone. But then, as always happens with ideas that are true, the world slowly caught up. Within decades of his death, The Prince was being read by kings across Europe. Within a century, it was considered essential reading for anyone who wanted to understand politics. Today, it is one of the most assigned books in universities across the entire world. Political science, business strategy, military theory,